Fablehaven, Chapter 13, An Unexpected Message. Sitting on the floor in the living room, Kendra took a bite of her second peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Scouring the kitchen, she and Seth had found enough food to last for weeks. The pantry contained fruits and vegetables, unbroken jars of preserves, bread, oatmeal, cream of wheat, crackers, tuna, and lots of other stuff. The fridge still worked, even lying on its side, and they cleaned out the broken glass the best they could. There remained plenty of milk, cheese, and eggs. The freezer held a lot of meat. Kendra took another bite. Leaning back, she closed her eyes. She felt hungry enough for a second sandwich, but now she doubted she would finish it. I'm exhausted, she announced. Me too, Seth said. He put a piece of cheese on a cracker and topped it with a sardine bathed in mustard sauce. My eyes feel itchy. My throat feels prickly, Kendra said. The sun isn't even down. What are we going to do about Grandpa? I think it's best that what we do is get some rest. We'll think more clearly in the morning. How long did we sleep last night? Seth asked. About a half an hour, Kendra guessed. We've stayed up for almost 2 days. Now you'll sleep for 2 days. Whatever, said Seth. It's true. Your glands will secrete a cocoon. I'm not that gullible. That's why you're so hungry. You're storing up fat for hibernation. Seth finished the cracker. You should try a sardine. I don't eat fish with heads still attached. The heads are the best part. You can feel the eyes pop when you... Enough, Kendra said, standing up. I need to get to bed. Seth rose as well. Me too. They climbed the stairs, passed down the cluttered hall, and mounted the steps to the attic. Their room had taken a beating. Everything except the beds. Goldilocks strutted over to the corner and started clucking. Her feed was scattered across the floor. You're right. That salt didn't seem to be working, Seth said. It might only work in here. They were jerks. Those goat guys were pretty funny. They're called satires, Kendra said. I need to find some seed batteries. They said they'd give us gold. They didn't say how much. Still, trading batteries for gold, I could become a millionaire. I'm not sure I trust those guys. Kendra flopped onto her bed, face in her pillow. What does Goldilocks keep clucking about? I bet she misses her cage. Seth crossed the floor to the flustered hen. Kendra, you better come see this. Can I look in the morning? She said, her voice muffled by the pillow. You need to look now. Kendra pushed herself off her bed and walked over to Seth. In a corner on the floor, more than 100 feed kernels had been arranged to form 6 letters. I M, next line, GRAM. You've got to be kidding, Kendra said. She gave Seth a suspicious glance. Did you write this? No way. Kendra squatted in front of Goldilocks. You're my Grandma Sorensen? The hen bobbed her head as if in affirmation. Was that a yes? The head bobbed again. Give me a no, so I can be sure, Kendra said. Goldilocks shook her head no. How did this happen? Seth asked. Somebody transformed you? The chicken bobbed her head. How do we change you back? Kendra asked. Goldilocks held still. Why didn't Grandpa change her back? Seth asked. Did Grandpa Sorensen try to restore you? Kendra inquired. Goldilocks bobbed her head and then shook it. Yes and no. The head nodded. He tried but failed, Kendra guessed. The hen gave another affirmative. Do you know a way we can change you back? Kendra asked. Another head bob. Is it something we can do in the house? Kendra asked. The head shook. Do we need to take you to the witch? Seth tried. The head bobbed, and then the hen flapped her wings, moving away. Wait, Grandma! Kendra reached for the hen, but the bird dodged her grasp. She's freaking out. Seth chased her down. Grandma, he said, can you still hear us? The hen made no acknowledgement of comprehension. Grandma, Kendra said, can you still respond to us? The chicken squirmed. Seth kept hold of her. The chicken pecked his hand and he dropped her. They watched Goldilocks. For several minutes she did nothing to suggest abnormal intelligence and offered no recognizable reaction to any questions. She was answering us before, right? Kendra asked. She wrote us a message, Seth said, pointing at the I am gram in the corner. She must have had just a short window to communicate with us, Kendra reasoned. Once she got the message across, she left it in our hands. Why hasn't she spoken up before? I don't know. Maybe she's tried, but we never got the message. Seth cocked his head thoughtfully and then gave a small shrug. Do we take her to the witch in the morning? I don't know. Muriel has only one knot left. No matter what, we can't undo the last knot, but maybe we can bargain with her. Bargain with what? Kendra asked. We could bring food or other stuff, things to make her more comfortable in that shack. I don't picture her going for it. She'll know we're desperate to fix Grandma. We won't give her another choice. Kendra bit her lip. What if she won't budge? She wouldn't for Grandpa. Do we set Muriel free if she will change Grandma back? No way, said Seth. As soon as she gets free, what keeps her from turning all of us into chickens? Grandpa said you can't use magic against others here unless they use it on you first. We never caused Muriel any harm, did we? But she's a witch, Seth said. Why would she be locked up if she wasn't dangerous? I'm not saying I want to let her go. I'm saying we might be in an emergency situation where we have no other options. It might be worth the risk in order to get Grandma back to help us. Seth thought about that. What if we can get her to tell us where Grandpa is? Or both, Kendra said, getting excited. I bet she would do just about anything to be released. I'm sure she would do those two things at least. Then we might actually get out of this mess. You're right. We don't have many options. We should sleep on it, Kendra said. We're both worn out. We can decide what to do in the morning. Okay. Kendra climbed into bed, slid under the covers, let her head sink into the pillow, and fell asleep before another thought entered her mind. Maybe we shouldn't have rinsed the milk out of our clothes, Seth said. Then we could churn butter while we walk. Foul. By the end of the day, I might have had yogurt in my armpits. You're psychotic, said Kendra. Then we could add some of Lena's jam and make it fruit at the bottom. Quit it. Seth seemed pleased with himself. Goldilocks rode in the wheelbarrow inside a burlap sack he had found in the pantry. They had tried to bend the cage back into shape, but could not get the door to stay on. The sack had a drawstring which they pulled snugly around the hen's neck so her head could stick out. It was hard to think of the chicken as Grandma Sorensen. The hen had not performed a single grandmotherly action all morning. She showed no reaction to the announcement that they were going to go see Muriel, and she had laid an egg on Kendra's bed during the night. Kendra and Seth had awakened just before sunrise. In the barn, they had found the wheelbarrow, which they determined might be easier than carrying Goldilocks the entire way to the Ivy shack. It was Kendra's turn pushing the wheelbarrow. The children seemed serene. She was probably enjoying the fresh air. The weather was pleasant, sunny and warm without being hot. Kendra wondered how the negotiations with Muriel would go. In the end, they had decided it would do no harm to see what terms they could reach with the witch. Then they could base their final decision on the facts of what Muriel would be willing to do rather than conjecture. They had loaded food, clothes, tools, and utensils in the wheelbarrow in case they might be able to barter with comforts instead of freedom. Most of the clothes had been mangled on Midsummer's Eve, but they found a few unshredded items for Grandma to wear in case they succeeded in transforming her. They had to make sure to feed the chickens some milk in the morning as well as to drink some themselves. The trails to the shack were not difficult to remember. Presently they identified the leafy structure where the witch lived. Leaving the wheelbarrow, Seth carried the chicken. While Kendra collected an armful of bartering items, Kendra had reminded Seth to stay calm and be polite no matter what happened. But she repeated the admonition. They heard strange music as they neared the shack, like somebody playing a rubber band while clacking castanets. When they got around to the front door, they found a grimy old hag playing a mouth harp with one hand while making her lumberjack dance with the other. I did not hope to have visitors again so soon, laughed the witch when her song ended. Pity about Stanley. What do you know about our grandpa? Seth asked. The woods are all abuzz with news of his abduction, Muriel said. The naiadic housekeeper as well. If one is to lend an ear to gossip, quite the scandal. Do you know where they are? Seth tried. Look at all the lovely gifts you have brought me, the witch gushed, clasping her veiny hands together. The quilt is gorgeous, but it would be ruined in my humble dwelling. I'll not let you waste your generosity on me. I would not know what to do with such niceties. We brought these to trade, Kendra said. Trade? The witch asked theatrically, smacking her lips. For my tea? Nonsense, child. I would not dream of exacting a toll for my hospitality. Come inside, and the three of us shall drink together. Not to trade for tea, Seth said, holding up Goldilocks. We want you to change your grandma back to herself. In exchange for a chicken? She is the chicken, Kendra explained. The witch grinned, stroking her chin. I thought I recognized her, she mused. You poor dears. One guardian carried off in the night, the other reduced to poultry. We can offer you a quilt, a bathrobe, a toothbrush, and a lot of homemade food, Kendra said. Charming as that may be, Muriel said, I would require the energy of a knot unraveling to work any spell capable of restoring your grandmother to her former state. We can't untie your last knot, Seth said. Grandpa would be furious. The witch shrugged. My predicament is simple. Imprisoned in the shack, I am curtailed in my abilities. The problem has nothing to do with my willingness to compromise. The dilemma is that the only way for me to fulfill your request would be to harness the power stored in the final knot. The decision lies in your hands. I have no other options. If we untie the last knot, will you also tell us where our grandpa was taken? Kendra asked. Child, I would love nothing more than to reunite you with your lost grandfather. But the truth of the matter is, I haven't the foggiest notion where he has been taken. Again, it would require losing my knot in order for me to marshal sufficient power to discern his whereabouts. Could you find Grandpa and change Grandma with the power from one knot? Kendra asked. Lamentably, I would have the opportunity to accomplish only one feat or the other. Both would not be possible. Unless you figure out why, you won't have a chance to do either, Seth said. Then we have reached an impasse, the witch apologized. If you tell me we have no deal, unless I'm able to accomplish the impossible, then we have no deal. I could fulfill either of your requests, but not both. If we have you change Grandma back, Kendra asked, could you help us find Grandpa once you're free? Perhaps, the witch mused. Yes, without guarantees. Once free, I could probably use my abilities to shed light on the location of your grandfather. How do we know you won't attack us if we let you go? Seth said. Fair question, Muriel said. I might be embittered by long years of imprisonment and eager to work mischief once released. However, I give you my word as a practitioner of the ancient art that I will not inflict any harm upon you or your grandmother upon my deliverance from this confinement. If I held any malice, it would be toward those who initiated my incarceration, enemies who passed from this life decades ago, not those who set me free. If anything, I would consider myself indebted. And you would promise to help us find Grandpa Sorensen, Kendra said. Your grandmother might refuse my help. She and your grandfather never held me in much esteem. But if she will accept my assistance in locating Stan, I will give it. We need to talk about this in private, Kendra said. Be my guest, Muriel said. Keth and Kendra and Seth returned to the path. Kendra dumped her bartering items in the wheelbarrow. She spoke in a soft whisper. I don't think we have any other choice. I don't like how nice she's being, said Seth. It's almost scarier than before. I think she's really anxious to get out. I know, but I think we're just as anxious to restore Grandma and maybe find Grandpa. She's a liar, Seth cautioned. I don't think we can count on any of her promises. Probably not. We should expect her to attack us as soon as she's free. If not, great, but I brought salt. Whatever good that will do. Don't forget, we'll have Grandma to help us handle her, Kendra said. Grandma might not know anything about fighting witches. I'm sure she's learned a trick or two. Let's try to ask her. Seth held the hen up. Kendra stroked her head gently. Grandma Sorensen, Kendra said. Ruth, I need you to listen to me. If you could hear me, we need you to answer. This is very important. The hen appeared to be listening. Should we untie the last knot to have Muriel Taggart restore you? The head bobbed. Was that a yes? The head bobbed again. Can you give us a no? The hen did not respond. Grandma Ruth, can you shake your head so we can be sure you hear us? Again, the chicken made no acknowledgement. Maybe it took all she had to answer your first question, Seth speculated. It did seem like she nodded, Kendra said, and I don't know what else we can do. Freeing the witch is a high price to pay, but it is worse than having no hope of finding Grandpa and keeping Grandma trapped forever as a chicken. We should free her. Kendra paused, scrutinizing her feelings. Was this really her only option? It seemed to be. Let's go back, she agreed. They returned to the doorway of the shack. We want to restore Grandma, Kendra said. You will voluntarily sunder my last knot, the final impediment to my independence, if I restore your grandmother to her human form? Yes. How do we do it? Just say, of my own free will, I will sever this knot, and then blow on it. You should probably find something for your grandmother to wear. She will not have any clothes on. Kendra ran to the wheelbarrow and returned with a bathrobe and a pair of slippers. Muriel stood in the doorway, clutching the rope. Lay your grandmother at my threshold, she instructed. I want to blow on the knot, Seth said. Sure, Kendra answered. You let Grandma out of the bag. Kendra squatted and pulled the mouth of the bag wide open. Muriel held the rope out to Seth. The chicken looked up, ruffling her feathers and flapping her wings. Kendra tried to unsteady her, disgusted by the feel of the slender bones moving beneath her hands. Of my own free will, I sever this knot, Seth said. As Goldilocks squawked noisily, he blew, and the knot unraveled. Muriel extended both hands over the flustered head and began to softly chanting indecipherable words. The air wavered. Kendra squeezed the squirming hen. At first, it felt like bubbles were shooting through the flesh of the bird. Then the delicate bones started to churn. Kendra dropped Goldilocks and stepped back. Kendra saw everything as if through funhouse lenses. Muriel appeared distorted, first stretching broad, then tall. Seth became an hourglass with a wide head and tiny waist and clownish feet. Rubbing her eyes failed to cure her warped vision. When she looked down, the ground curved away in all directions. She leaned and swung her arms to maintain her balance. The funhouse Muriel began to ripple, as did the startling image of Goldilocks shedding feathers as she expanded into a person. The scene grew dim, as if clouds had blocked the sun, and the dark aura gathered around Muriel and Grandma. The darkness expanded, the momentarily obscuring everything, and then Grandma stood before them, completely naked. Kendra put on the bathrobe over her shoulders. From inside the shack came a sound like the rushing of a terrible wind. The ground rumbled. "Get down," Grandma said, pulling Kendra to the ground. Seth also fell flat. A furious gale blasted the walls of the shack into shrapnel. The roof rocketed beyond the treetops, a geyser of wood and confetti. The stump split down the center. Fragments of timber and ivy whistled in all directions, clattering against the trunks of trees and slashing through the undergrowth. Kendra raised her head. Dressed in rags, Muriel gaped in wonder. Chips of wood continued to fall like hail, along with fluttering bits of ivy. Muriel grinned, displaying deformed teeth and inflamed gums. She began to chuckle, tears brimming in her eyes. She flung her wrinkled arms wide. "Emancipation!" she cried. "Justice at last!" Grandma Sorensen rose to her feet. She was shorter and stouter than Muriel, with hair the color of cinnamon and sugar. "You must vacate this property immediately." Muriel glowered at Grandma, the joy in her gaze eclipsed by spite. A tear escaped and slid down the crease of her chin. "This is my thanks for unbinding your curse?" "You have your reward for the services you rendered. You have emerged from confinement. Eviction from this preserve is the consequence of prior indiscretions." "My debts have been paid. You are not the caretaker." "My authority is the same as my husband's. In his absence, I am indeed the caretaker. I invite you to leave and never return." Muriel began tromping away. "Where I go is my business." She did not look back. "Not on my preserve." "Your preserve, is it? I object to your claims of ownership." Muriel still had not looked back. Grandma started walking after her, an old woman in a bathrobe trailing an old woman dressed in rags.